If every Rick went to war tonight, who actually wins? Got a favourite Rick yet, or are you still pretending they're all the same guy with different hats if every Rick in the multiverse declared war on every other Rick tonight? Which one walks away holding the last portal gun, and which ones are just vaporised science grandpas on the floor? Your gut answer is probably C-137, right? The quote-unquote main Rick, the guy who blew up the Council of Ricks and emotionally speedruns Morty like it's an illegal science experiment. But believe it or not, the show has quietly told us that C-137 might only be mid-tier in the grand scheme of Rick power scaling. And yeah, I hate that phrase as much as you do, because not every Rick is built the same. You've got political Ricks who run entire governments, like President Morty's puppet, Ricks on the Citadel. You've got God Tech Ricks who build pocket universes where they are literally the local deity. And then you've got the freaks who rewire the multiverse itself, like whoever helped design the central finite curve that's not just smart, that's I committed a hate crime against every non-Rick timeline smart. So here's what we're going to do. We're putting every major type of Rick on trial in a different way. Not for their crimes this time, but for their raw power, their influence and their ability to survive a full-blown Rick-on-Rick World War III. And by the end, we're going to crown one apex. Rick the scariest, most dangerous Rick alive, or formerly alive, or technically outside the curve entirely. And if you ask me, C-137 might be walking out of this, looking kind of average, just to give you an idea of how insane this gets. Picture the highlight reel. C-137 casually nukes the Council of Ricks with a virus bomb and walks away. Evil Morty hijacks the entire Citadel election, then shatters the central finite curve like it's a Netflix password wall. Rick Prime is so terrifying that an infinite Citadel literally exists to hide from him. And somewhere out there, a Rick powers his car with an enslaved miniverse civilization, while Wasp Rick is committing sticky war crimes in a universe where being a bug is apparently legal. Each of those moments is a different flavour of power. C-137 has improvisational murder genius evil. Morty's Rick operates on long-term multiversal chess. Rick Prime is pure narrative horror movie energy. And the Miniverse guy is a small-scale god with a really bad HR department. So who wins that war? The one with the biggest gun, the one who controls the most Ricks, or the one who can delete the battlefield entirely? Buckle up, because we're going to run a full countdown from local neighbourhood menace Ricks. The guys who are just a crime against their own families all the way up to multiversal architect. Ricks, the ones who rewrite the rules of reality, and somewhere at the top of that list, the most powerful Rick might not even want to be called Rick anymore anyway. Let's start at the bottom of the food chain and work our way up. Our fake science of Rick power, rules, metrics, and plot armor. So before we start handing out multiversal arrest warrants to every grandpa with blue hair, we need to answer one thing. When we say most powerful Rick, what are we actually talking about? Is it the Rick who can build a death laser fastest, the Rick who commands the most other Ricks, or the Rick who can look at the laws of reality and go, yeah, that's optional? Because power for a Rick isn't just who can bench press a Meeseeks box. You've got raw IQ, sure, but you've also got tech, political control, and then this really cursed fifth category, being so important to the story that the universe literally refuses to let you die. That's not just power, that's illegal levels of plot armor. So here's our fake science. We're grading every major Rick on a 5-part power rubric. Category 1, raw intelligence and invention speed. How fast can this guy go from bad idea to working war crime? C-137 whips up a neutrino bomb in, what, a drunken afternoon? Other Ricks need a committee meeting. Category 2, tech and resources. Portal guns, space cruisers, backup bodies, miniverses, entire pocket dimensions where physics is just a suggestion. The more absurd the arsenal, the higher the score, even if half of it should probably be illegal in 12 galaxies. Category 3, social and political control. How many Ricks and Mortys does this guy command? Are we talking sad dude in a garage, or president of the Citadel with a literal Morty underclass? Just to give you an idea of how messed up that is, imagine being so powerful your voter base is traumatized children. Category 4, multiversal influence. Does this Rick just wreck his own timeline, or does he change the rules for everyone? The guys who mess with the central finite curve, rewrite who gets to be smart or blow up the Citadel, they're getting a hell of a boost here. And finally, Category 5, narrative plot armor and meta power. Who feels untouchable because the show itself is scared to get rid of them? C-137, Rick Prime, The mysterious Rick who helped evil Morty pull off that finite curve escape. These are the ones playing chess with the script. Now, ground rules. We're only counting Ricks who are on screen, clearly described or strongly implied in canon. If it doesn't have at least one frame of animation or one line of dialogue, it doesn't count. You can write all the fanfic you want about Rick, but he's God and also Batman, but we're not sentencing that guy. C137 is our baseline boss. He's the default top Rick everybody assumes wins by default, so as we go, I'm going to keep asking, is this Rick above or below C137? Think of it like adding days to a prison sentence. We'll keep a running C137 meter in your head. We're going to start with the low-level local Ricks, the petty criminals with cool gadgets, and by the end we'll be up in that uncomfortable space where one Rick's choices delete entire realities. And if you ask me, C137 might not love where he ends up on that list. Anyway, buckle up. Defining the average Rick. How strong is just a Rick? So before we crown the most powerful Rick in existence, you kinda need to know what just a Rick looks like. Like, what's the starter pack? Because if you don't get the baseline, you can't appreciate how terrifying the top 1% really are. On the Citadel, an average Rick is still the smartest being in his entire universe, and he's working a soul-crushing day job. You've got factory worker Ricks cranking out wafers flavoured with orphaned Morty's memories. You've got cop Ricks shaking down alien civilians with illegal brain scanners. You've got teacher Ricks doing algebra while their Mortys get bullied in the hallway. It's like if every Einstein got sentenced to community college adjunct work for life. And the wild part, even these wage slave Ricks casually swing tech that would make any other universe's god jealous. Cop Rick pulls out a gun that erases your memories, your rights, and probably your browser history in one shot. Teacher Rick has access to multiversal history, brain download helmets, and a classroom full of test subject Mortys. Factory Rick is literally helping run an industrial-scale psychic torture operation. That's just to give you an idea of how low the bar is for horrifying in Rick culture. All of that is baked into the central finite curve. Remember that? The giant multiversal filter made by Ricks, for Ricks. Every reality inside it is rigged so that Rick is the smartest man alive. Not one of the smartest, the smartest. Which means your average Citadel Rick is already a localized apex predator, legally, morally, and scientifically unsupervised. The universe is his playground, and HR still has him filling out timesheets. But here's the tragic kind of funny part. Most of them do absolutely nothing universe-shattering with it. They clock in, clock out, complain about their Morty, and maybe commit the occasional light war crime on lunch break. For some reason, the majority of Ricks are content being cogs in a machine built by other Ricks. Imagine having the brain to invent a miniverse, and you're using it to grade Morty homework. That gap between potential and ambition is everything. On paper, any random Citadel Rick could build a council, overthrow a government, or destabilize the curve itself. In practice, they're arguing over union breaks and abusing Mortys for stress relief. Believe it or not, C137 isn't special because he's smart. He's special because he actually acts on how smart he is. So if normal Rick is already a universe-breaking genius with god-tier tech and zero supervision, who counts as powerful? The ones who look at that starting point and say, nah, I want to be in charge of the people in charge, and those are the Ricks we're going to next. Actually, scratch that. Before we go up, let's stop at the middle management of infinity. The Ricks who turned being Rick into a full-blown political system. Power isn't just guns. The 5 lenses of Rick dominance power isn't just who has the biggest portal gun. If every Rick went to war tonight, the winner isn't the one who shoots first. It's the one who already rigged the battlefield, the rulebook, and probably your TV remote. So buckle up because we're going to break Rick power into 5 lenses, and C137 is our very illegal, very unstable baseline. First lens, raw intelligence and invention speed. C137 doesn't just test well, he speedruns godhood. He whips up a neutrino bomb in, minutes? No planning, no committee, just, I got bored, let's threaten global extinction before breakfast. He casually invents interdimensional cable, like you or I would scroll Netflix. Need infinite channels from infinite realities? Give him an afternoon and a hangover. Under pressure, other Ricks need labs, assistants, safety protocols. C137 is solving universe-sized problems mid-argument, drunk, while insulting Morty's GPA. That on-the-fly genius is a hell of a weapon all by itself. Second lens, tech and resources. Some RICs don't stop at a garage lab. They upscale themselves into entire economies. You've got RICs who own pocket universes, literal slave batteries where whole civilizations unknowingly power one guy's car. You've got RICs with fleets of ships, drone armies, secret asteroid bases, entire citadel sectors wired to their personal research. Just to give you an idea of how extra that is, an average RIC might have a portal gun and a ship. A top-tier RIC has a supply chain, a workforce, and a backup universe if he misplaces the first one. Third lens, social and political control. The Citadel is what happens when RICs discover bureaucracy and decide, yeah, I can weaponize this. President RIC doesn't need to vaporize you himself, he has cops, judges, and Morty labor camps to do it. Council RICs write the laws, education RICs brainwash the next generation, and law enforcement RICs keep everyone in line. No portal gun needed, just policy. It's power that looks boring on paper and is absolutely terrifying if you ask me. Fourth lens, multiversal influence. This is central finite curve territory. Some RICs don't just use the multiverse, they edit it. They build a filter that says only universes where Rick is the smartest man alive get to count. Everyone else? Outside the wall, good luck with your freedom and your non-Rick science. Evil Morty's whole plan is hijacking that system, cracking the Citadel, and walking out of the filtered sandbox. Any Rick plugged into that level of architecture isn't just strong in a universe, he's strong over which universes are allowed to exist. And finally, the cursed fifth lens, narrative or meta power. Certain Ricks, C137, Rick Prime, feel like the show itself bends around them. They survive impossible odds, get special framing, flashbacks, tragic music cues. When a random Rick dies, it's a gag. When Rick Prime shows up, it's an event. Is that fair power? No. Is it real in a story? Definitely. The writers are basically a higher dimensional court handing out plot armor like reduced sentence time for fan favorites. And I don't know, I'm kind of here for it. Keep these 5 lenses in your head, because next we're going to start grading actual Ricks on this scale, and some fan favorite candidates are about to look way less impressive. The Council of Ricks, Galactic HOA or True Powerhouse? So with our little power rubric loaded, let's aim it at the most obvious candidate, the Citadel and the Council of Ricks. Infinite Ricks in one space station, all armed, all genius, all kind of emotionally unavailable. Sounds like the final boss, right? Not exactly. The Citadel is basically a multiversal HOA built by Ricks, for Ricks, to hide from an even scarier Rick. That alone tells you everything. If the most organized Ricks in existence built a space city just to duck Rick Prime, that's not peak dominance, that's witness protection with extra steps. Their power is defensive, standardized portal tech, interdimensional cops, prisons, brain scanners, and a bureaucracy so dense it should be illegal on its own. On paper, it's terrifying. You've got interdimensional law enforcement that can tag and bag rogue Ricks, portal guns all running on the same network, and the ability to call in like 12 Ricks with sniper rifles every time one Morty gets uppity. Just to give you an idea of how concentrated that is, any single Rick is already a one-man war crime factory. Now imagine a city where that's the baseline citizen. But here's the catch. They're still trapped inside the central finite curve. All that power only exists in a walled garden specifically curated so Rick is the smartest guy in the room. That's not godhood. That's playing on easy mode with cheats turned on. And even then, the Citadel is ridiculously vulnerable to basic politics. One election, and suddenly, President Morty walks in, smiles, and quietly speedruns regime change. We've literally watched this unstoppable institution get clowned on twice. First, C137. Rick destabilizes the council with one targeted frame job and some portal-hopping chaos. One guy with a grudge and a portal gun turns their elite leadership into space dust. Then, evil Morty shows up, rides the Citadel's own systems like a stolen car, and uses it as a battery to punch a hole through the central finite curve. Remember, the Citadel was supposed to be the safest place for Ricks. It turns into a launch pad for the thing they were hiding from. So how strong is your average council Rick compared to C137? On paper, way stronger. Backup on speed dial, access to Citadel tech, legal authority over other Ricks. But C137 has something they don't. Chaotic creativity and zero attachment to the system. He's willing to burn the HOA down, salt the ruins, and move to a new dimension with a fresh Morty like it's changing apartments. You can't out-bureaucrat a guy whose whole strategy is, what if I just blow up the building? If you ask me, the Council and Citadel leadership are powerful as a system, but no individual Council Rick cracks our actual top tier. The real monsters are the ones who treat the Citadel like a toy, not a throne. And one Rick in particular doesn't just step outside their system, he might have helped build the cage they're stuck in. Buckle up, because he's next. President Rick and political Ricks, soft power, hard consequences. So if the Council are just glorified HOEA, presidents for Ricks, what happens when a Rick becomes an actual president? Not president of the garage, I mean president of the Citadel. President Rick is what you get when a Rick figures out you don't need the biggest gun if you can order 10,000 Ricks with bigger guns to point theirs for you. This is soft power Rick style. He's not always the one pulling the trigger, he's the one signing the form that says, yeah, go ahead, vaporize those guys. You see it in the Ricklantis mix-up when Campaign Rick turns into President Rick, and suddenly every hallway, every classroom, every factory full of Mortys is his personal inventory. He doesn't have to build a death ray when he can just reassign an entire police force of Ricks and Mortys to, oops, they died on duty. Citadel presidents control the three big levers: education, labour, policing. That's real power. They decide what Mortys are taught, which is wild because school was already a crime in Rick's mind. Now imagine a Rick writing the curriculum. Welcome to Ethics 101, Don't Get Caught. Kids grow up in Morty schools where the lesson is basically, your pain keeps Rick society running. Then those same Mortys get funneled into factories, Citadel maintenance, or disposable adventure duty. Just to give you an idea of how messed up that is, President Rick can literally choose which generation of Mortys gets sent to die fixing some other Rick's portal gun mistake. And the cops? The Citadel police are basically Rick's immune system. You speak out, you protest, you accidentally think a non-Rick thought in public, suddenly a squad of weaponized Mortys is on you. A single doomsday device might wipe a city, but a president who can industrialize cruelty and stupidity? That's a hell of a lot scarier if you ask me. He can mass-produce bad decisions at scale. One Rick with a bomb is a terrorist. One Rick who can sign a paper and send an army of Mortys into a meat grinder is a whole war machine. The dark comedy is that it's all treated like normal politics. Debates, campaigns, polling stations staffed by terrified Mortys. You're watching a Rick shake hands and kiss babies in a place literally designed by Ricks to escape Rick Prime. It's like if Palpatine ran on a jobs platform and everybody just bought it. Believe it or not, the most illegal thing happening on the Citadel isn't the secret labs, it's the way they convinced Mortys this is the best they can hope for. So why don't these political Ricks top our list? Simple. They're trapped in their own system. Elections, coups, bored Ricks who are going to leave the Citadel the second it stops being fun. You can vote them out, overthrow them, or just portal away and ignore their laws. President Rick is dangerous, but he's still playing within the central finite curve sandbox. The Ricks we're heading toward don't play the game. They delete the scoreboard. They don't win elections, they erase the entire voting district from the multiverse. And one of them already used the Citadel presidency as a stepping stone to something way worse. Buckle up. 137. Rick, our baseline monster and multiversal escape artist. And at the center of all that chaos sits our guy, C-137 Rick. If every Rick went to war tonight, this is the one Vegas would put odds on. Not because he's the nicest or the bravest, but because he's a walking war crime wrapped in a lab coat who refuses to stay dead. Let's start with the headline feats, because this dude's resume is a hell of a red flag. He doesn't just annoy the Council of Ricks, he annihilates them. He infiltrates their Citadel, frames them with fake evidence, and destabilizes the entire ruling body of Infinite Ricks, like he's deleting a spam folder. Then you've got the Galactic Federation's super prison. Normal people get 10 days for contempt of court. C-137 gets captured by a galaxy-spanning government, gets mind-hacked, and still jailbreaks himself using nothing but his brain, a virtual simulation, and spite. And when he's done, he doesn't just escape. He nukes their entire economy with one scheme. He crashes the value of their currency so hard that the Federation literally collapses. That's not just illegal. That's, you broke capitalism for several planets. Illegal. Just to give you an idea of how out of pocket that is, imagine one old drunk in a garage personally causing the fall of the EU, the UN, and Space Amazon in a single afternoon. That's before we even talk about how he keeps surviving traps built by other Ricks. The Citadel is full of guys who think like him, plan like him, and hate him. He still outplays their kill squads, their assassins, and their bureaucratic systems like it's Tuesday. Believe it or not, C-137 is the Rick other Ricks put warning labels on. Power-wise, his brain is the main warhead. He builds dimension-hopping portal tech, mind control helmets, memory tampering devices, and literal universe reset buttons in what feels like real time. Half the time he's drunk, depressed, or both. You and I need 3 days and a YouTube tutorial to assemble IKEA furniture. He invents a car battery that contains an enslaved civilization on a whim. If you ask me, that's god-tier intelligence with zero HR oversight. But his real superpower might be social and psychological. This guy convinces Morty to bury his own corpse, talks Summer into guarding a Mad Max wasteland, and emotionally puppeteers Beth by dangling abandonment issues like a carrot on a stick. He even gets Jerry, the human participation trophy, to tag along on lethal missions. That's not just charisma, that's weaponized family trauma. On top of all that, C-137 has meta power. The show frames him as the main Rick, the narrative center of the central finite curve. He has protagonist armor so thick he can comment on tropes while surviving things that would liquefy a background Rick in 2 seconds. He knows he's in a story and still chooses violence. So where does that put him? Easily top 1% of Ricks by any metric. Brains, tech, body count, emotional damage. But here's the scary part. The show has started introducing Ricks who make C-137 flinch. When the monster's monster is scared, you've got to ask, who's up the food chain from him? Buckle up, because the next Rick on our list doesn't just beat C-137, he breaks the entire curve he's standing on. Family as a weapon, how C-137 uses Morty, Summer, and Beth. So, when we say C-137 is top 1% of Ricks, we're not just talking about gadgets and body count. We're talking about his side hustle as a war criminal PTA dad. If every Rick is a mad scientist, C-137 is the one who figured out you can speedrun power by turning your family into equipment. Start with Morty. Poor kid is basically a human firewall with anxiety. Rick literally explains that Morty's stupid brainwaves cancel out his own genius signature, so the Council of Ricks can't track him. That's not a metaphor, that is canon. You know what kind of grandpa looks at his grandson and goes, "Nice beta brain, kid. You're my portable VPN." The same guy who drags him into universe-ending situations and calls it an adventure. Morty thinks he's leveling up. Rick's just equipping his favorite damage sponge. Remember the neutrino bomb in the pilot? Rick's blackout drunk ranting about starting over, and Morty's the one standing under the bomb like a confused emotional support animal. That's not just child endangerment, that's using a minor as a blast radius tester. If you ask me, contributing to the delinquency of a Morty should be its own crime category. Now compare that to Summer. She actually gets moments of respect. Rick calls her capable, lets her help with the Mad Max scavenger run, even hands her a gun without the usual "you're an idiot" speech. Sounds better, right? Buckle up because the upgrade is fake. He's still weaponizing her, just in a different way. With Morty, it's brain waves. With Summer, it's insecurity. Anytime she's desperate for his approval, Rick dials it up. He invites her to the spacebar crawl, feeds her that "you're not like other people, you get it" line. And suddenly she's riding shotgun on illegal alien debauchery. She thinks she's finally on Rick's level. Rick just unlocked the emotionally compromised teen perk. Beth, though? Beth is where it gets actually scary. Morty and Summer are tools. Beth is infrastructure. Rick's abandonment, the way he drips out affection like it's a controlled substance. The whole "one of you is a clone, maybe, who knows, shots" thing. That's domestic psychological warfare. He's built an entire power grid out of her need to feel chosen. Just to give you an idea of how messed up that is, Beth literally accepts the possibility she's a clone and still keeps orbiting him. That's not love. That's a hostage situation with extra steps. As a grandparent, Rick is the worst possible mix of fun grandpa and war criminal. He'll take you to intergalactic Disneyland, then casually turn you into a bargaining chip if the ride breaks down. And believe it or not, that emotional leverage is a huge part of why C-137 ranks so high. He's not just the smartest Rick, he's the one who min-maxed family as a stat. But here's the creepy thought. What about the Ricks who don't need a family at all? No Beth to manipulate, no Morty shield, no summer sidekick, just pure uncut Rick. You'd think that makes them weaker. I don't know, I'm kind of here for the argument that it makes them way worse. Because the next Rick on our list, he treats the entire multiverse the way C-137 treats his grandkids. Tech gods, Miniverse Ricks, Wasp Rick, and localized omnipotence. Because what's scarier than a Rick without a family? A Rick who replaces family with infrastructure. You've got Ricks out here building entire universes just to power their car battery. That's not a side project. That's a full-blown tech cult with one worship target, the Alternator. Buckle up, because the Miniverse Ricks are a special kind of insane flex. C-137 casually reveals he built a miniverse, populated it with sentient life, gave them fake science, and tricked them into generating electricity, so he doesn't have to buy gas. Another Rick in that episode did the exact same thing, then got so lazy he made a teeny verse inside the Miniverse. Just to give you an idea of how cruel that is, from the tiny people's perspective, their entire physics, culture, and purpose are just one guy's car charger. That's not just illegal, that's cosmic wage theft. Inside those pocket universes, Rick is basically God with a lab coat. He defines the laws of physics, introduces technology, and can wipe them all out with a single stomp on a little cube. No elections, no appeals, no courts. The sentence for disobeying Rick is, your whole reality gets unplugged. And if you ask me, that's a hell of a dark punchline for a joke about a dead battery. And it's not just tech. Look at Wasp Rick from the multiverse montage. Different biology, same terrifying brain. This guy lives in a world where everyone is a hyper-predatory wasp person, and he's still the apex predator emotionally and intellectually. He's happily injecting paralyzed victims with larvae at the breakfast table like it's no big deal. That's localized omnipotence too. He's so adapted to his ecosystem that morality is just optional DLC. You see this pattern with tons of variant Ricks, psychic parasite fighting Ricks, fascist Ricks, citadel bureaucrat Ricks. Give any of them a lab, a few gadgets, and like 3 days, and suddenly they're rewriting the rules of whatever dimension they're in. Inside their basement, their miniverse, their wasp hive, they can control life, death, and sometimes literal reality with zero meaningful opposition. They're not just the smartest man in the room. They built the room, locked the door, and hid the key inside a sentient battery civilization. But here's the catch. That power doesn't really scale. They're giant fish in very self-curated ponds. All those miniverses, citadels, and fascist dimensions are still trapped inside the central finite curve, Rick's sandbox where he's guaranteed to be the smartest guy around. They're playing God inside a filter someone else designed. So if these Ricks are gods inside their own little universes, what do you even call the Ricks who don't just rule the sandbox but rewrite the sandbox's code for every universe at once? Metalaw 101, the central finite curve, explained like you're Jerry. Okay, buckle up, because we're about to explain the central finite curve to you, like you're Jerry trying to read the terms and conditions on a soul-binding iTunes update. Think of the multiverse as every possible universe. Ones where Rick is a genius, ones where Rick is a horse, ones where Rick never existed because Beth actually picked a different college major. Infinite chaos. The central finite curve is what happens when a bunch of Ricks look at that mess and say, yeah, no, we're going to build a cosmic gated community. Legally speaking, it's a jurisdiction line. Inside the curve, only universes where Rick is the smartest being alive. Outside the curve, out of bounds, no Rick supremacy allowed. In fake legal language, the curve is basically a multiversal zoning ordinance. Section 1. All admitted timelines must feature at least one Rick Sanchez as the top intellectual authority. Section 2. Any god, eldritch horror, or brain bigger than Rick's ego is either filtered out, quarantined, or never allowed to spawn. Violation of this statute. Immediate narrative deportation outside the curve. It's not just a boundary, it's a rigged rule book. And that has a hell of an implication. Every Rick inside this thing starts at the top of the food chain by default. You're not watching an underdog scientist claw his way up from nothing. You're watching the guy who helped design the ranking system. By design, all the universes where some other species evolves past Rick, or where a godlike AI outsmarts him, or where Morty actually passes a math test without help, those are either trimmed out or shoved into the do not show on TV pile. So when you see Rick fighting galactic federations, demon entities, or presidents with drone strikes, it feels like he's punching up, right? big bad government, scrappy little grandpa, yada yada. But legally speaking, inside the central finite curve, Rick is the default tyrant. The curve is a multiversal firewall that says, no higher authority, no superior brain, no appeal. He's not a rogue criminal in a huge cosmos. He's the top cop, the judge, and the guy who wrote the penal code in crayon. Just to give you an idea of how rigged that is, imagine every crime you commit is in a town where you also happen to be the only licensed lawyer, the only judge, and the only person who can read. That's Rick. The curve makes sure the universe is never smarter than him. Which is probably illegal on like 5 cosmic civil rights levels, but who's going to file the complaint? God. She's outside the jurisdiction. And here's the scary part. The Ricks we really need to talk about are the ones who either built this filter, learned to exploit it, or figured out how to break out of it. Those are the Ricks with structural power. If you ask me, a Rick who can step outside the curve isn't just playing God in his sandbox anymore, he's editing the laws of reality for everybody else. And one particular Rick has already teamed up with someone who did exactly that. Evil Morty's Rick, the ghost in the machine. We never fully see, and one particular Rick has already teamed up with someone who did exactly that. Evil Morty. So buckle up, because to figure out how powerful that Morty really is, you kind of have to ask, what sort of Rick lets that happen in the first place? Walk it back. Evil Morty doesn't just wake up one day and speedrun godhood. He infiltrates the Citadel as a fake good Morty, rigs an entire election, manipulates thousands of Ricks and Mortys into voting for him, and then hijacks the Citadel's core systems to access the central finite curve. That's not just a clever kid with a laptop. That is a long con that assumes Rick-level infrastructure already exists and can be exploited. You don't brute force your way into the multiversal firewall. You piggyback on the guy who built the Wi-Fi. So who is that guy? Did Evil Morty have a specific Rick partner, creator, or victim whose tech he cannibalized? Is there an Evil Morty's Rick out there who originally designed the systems that touch the curve itself? Because somebody had to architect a setup where one Morty with the right clearance can jailbreak infinity. And if you ask me, that's a hell of a design flaw. Best case scenario, this Rick is an unwitting donor. Maybe he's a top-tier council engineer, the kind of Rick who writes the Citadel's operating system, builds the central finite curve access points, and signs off on the security protocols Evil Morty later shreds like a pop-up ad. Worst case, he's a willing collaborator who looked at his Morty and went, yeah, let's commit multiversal treason together, that sounds fun. Either way, the power level is the same. He's operating at or above the top 1% of Ricks who coordinate infinite versions of themselves. Just to give you an idea of how scary that is, regular Ricks make mini-verses, enslave civilizations, and wipe out planets before breakfast. That's Tuesday. Evil Morty's Rick is playing with the source code that decides which universes even count. He's not just building weapons, he's building the rules that say who gets to have weapons. And that's why this ghost in the machine Rick is terrifying. He either raised or empowered a Morty who outplayed the entire Citadel, hijacked its government, and walked straight out of the central finite curve like it was a bad neighborhood. That implies a level of negligence or ambition way past normal Rick cruelty. Regular Rick is, oops, I Cronenberg'd the planet. This Rick is, oops, my side project deleted the training wheels on reality. Believe it or not, I don't know, I'm kind of here for it. We can't slap a clean power ranking number on him yet because the show hasn't put his face on screen. But the very fact that Evil Morty exists means there's a shadow tier of Ricks whose influence is felt through other people. And those are exactly the kind of Ricks you have to watch when we start talking about explicit apex monsters like Rick Prime, who doesn't just exploit the system, he's the reason it was built in fear. Running total. Where our power scale sits so far. So before we start throwing around names like Rick Prime and acting like we're ranking elder gods, we need to stop and look at the monster we've already built. Because our weakest Ricks, they're already nightmare fuel. At the bottom of this ladder, you've got your average Citadel Rick. The guy working a desk job, maybe running a pawn shop, maybe bullying a Morty in a hallway. And even that dude casually has a portal gun, access to multiversal black markets, and tech that could erase your entire bloodline in, like, 3 button presses. He's mid, he's the background extra of Ricks, and he can still enslave a planet on his lunch break if he feels spicy. Then you climb a little higher and hit the political class. President Ricks, Council Ricks, the ones who figured out you don't have to conquer the multiverse if you can just write the rules. These guys don't just commit the crime, they make it legal. They weaponize bureaucracy, hide genocide behind committee meetings, and hand out Mortys like emotional support animals. Believe it or not, that's still within the system. They're terrifying, but they're also kind of company men. Above them are the local tech gods. The Ricks who build miniverses, battery universes, or entire pocket realities just to power their car or win an argument. You've got Ricks whose home project is playing God to trillions. Just to give you an idea of how broken that is, C-137 casually creates and destroys self-aware civilizations as a side quest in a road trip episode. For him, that's Tuesday. And sitting at the top of everything we've actually seen on screen, you've got C-137 himself. If we're slapping numbers on this, he's our confirmed 10. He breaks out of galactic prison, destabilizes the council, survives evil Morty's political purge, and walks around like the laws of physics are more of a suggestion. Dude is a walking plot armor factory. If you ask me, any version of you or me is getting deleted by this guy in the first 5 seconds of a fight. But here's the creepy part. All of those Ricks, even C-137, are still playing inside the central finite curve. They're operating in a rigged casino where Rick is guaranteed to be the smartest man alive. The house always wins, and the house is Rick. We've barely touched the ones who attack the casino itself, the Ricks who terrify the Citadel instead of serving it, the architect Ricks who helped build the curve, the post-curve Ricks living in universes where Rick isn't automatically top dog anymore, the kind of guys who look at other Ricks and see NPCs. If C-137 is a 10, these are your 11s and 12. They don't just bend rules, they delete the menu. Rick Prime, the original boogeyman, the brains behind the curve, the unknown Ricks who survived evil Morty's grand jailbreak and kept going. We're about to talk about Ricks who are so powerful, the scale stops working. So buckle up, because from here on out, every Rick we mention isn't just dangerous to Morty, he's dangerous to the idea of Rick himself. Rick Prime, the boogeyman of infinite Ricks. And at the center of that existential horror movie, you've got one guy, Rick Prime. You know you're a special kind of monster when the scariest being in the multiverse is the version of you that other yous tell campfire stories about. Let's lay out the canon rap sheet. Rick Prime is the one who walked into a garage, dangled portal tech in front of a younger C-137, got turned down, and then responded by casually nuking Diane and Little Beth into red mist. No council, no Citadel, no evil Morty yet. Just one Rick committing what is basically the original Rick crime. That trauma is so bad it hijacks C-137's entire life. He spends decades hunting one guy, not the Federation, not God, one Rick. And just to give you an idea of how terrifying that is, the Citadel, the big multiversal Rick bunker full of infinite narcissists who think they're untouchable, that was literally invented as a hideout from Rick Prime. Infinite super geniuses all looked at each other and went, yeah, we need a gated community, but for Ricks, because one of them refused to play nice. When a whole species of god-tier nerds builds a panic room for one bully, that's not just strength, that's paradigm-level threat. The symbolism is brutal. The central finite curve already rigs reality, so Rick is always the smartest guy in the room. Rick Prime is the guy who scares the smartest guy in every room. He doesn't just break the rules of the curve, he lives outside the safety net it creates. No council protection, no Citadel voting block, no emotional support Morty. He's out there raw dogging the multiverse while everyone else hides behind bureaucracy and variance. Power profile-wise, he's at least C-137 level smart, probably higher, and way less emotionally compromised. Our Rick has grandkids, a weird pride thing, and if you ask me, at least 2 brain cells of guilt. Rick Prime has none of that. No family to kidnap, no Beth to appeal to, no Morty to turn against him. You can't threaten what he doesn't care about. Other Ricks are tools or targets. He treats them like lab rats with portal guns, which makes him way more ruthless and way less predictable. Narratively, he's C-137's white whale. The origin of his alcoholism, his paranoia, his whole I'm the smartest screw feelings persona. Every time Rick Prime shows up, our Rick stops being the untouchable god and turns into a scared, angry old man with unfinished business. That's real power. He can destabilize Rick emotionally and strategically just by existing. So yeah, if you're ranking most powerful Rick on fear, influence and independence from the Curve's training wheels, Rick Prime is absolutely a co-contender for the crown. But buckle up, because there's one kind of power he might not fully own yet, the power to write the curve itself. And the next Rick we talk about might be playing that game. Architect Ricks, who built the central finite curve. So if Rick Prime is playing 4D chess, the next Ricks we have to talk about are the ones who built the board. Literally. The central finite curve did not just pop into existence like a bad improv bit. Somebody coded that cage. Somebody drew the line in reality and said, from this point on, Rick wins. The show all but tells you this thing is engineered. It's a filter. Only universes where Rick is the smartest guy in the room get to be inside. That's not natural selection, that's curation. That's some Rick, or a cabal of Ricks, looking at an infinite multiverse and going, yeah, I'm going to need you to delete every version where I'm not top dog. If you ask me, that's a hell of a crime against existence, and also a hell of a flex. Think about normal Ricks first. Regular Citadel Rick, he's like a street criminal with a portal gun. President Rick, that guy's a judge. He hands down policy, sentences other Ricks, decides what's legal and illegal inside one citadel. Big deal. Architect Ricks are way past that. They're the ones who wrote the Cosmic Criminal Code in the first place. They didn't just build the prison. They decided which beings are allowed to be born with the keys. If regular Ricks blow up planets, Architect Ricks blow up possibilities. They're cosmic legislators. They don't rule one city-state of Ricks. They define the constitutional law of reality across an infinite set of universes. Who can exist? Who can compete? Who even gets to try to be smarter than a Rick? All of that got pre-edited in the curve's favour. You don't even get a trial, you just get reality rejected at the door. And the terrifying implication here is pretty simple. By designing a multiverse where Rick is always the smartest, they didn't just empower themselves, they preemptively executed every rival they could have had. Any god, AI, or cosmic brain that might out-Rick a Rick. Gone. Filtered out before the opening credits. They won every war before the first shot fired. No armies, no portal guns, no Morty speeches, just structural dominance baked into the code of everything. Believe it or not, that might be the scariest kind of power in the show. You're not watching a guy break the rules, you're watching the downstream chaos of whoever made the rules, and we probably never meet them directly. They're like the founding fathers of Rick tyranny, dead, missing, or retired, but every crime C-137 commits is technically living in their house. Just to give you an idea of how high that is on the food chain, Evil Morty's big yellow portal moment. That's not just him clowning on our Rick, that's him taking a sledgehammer to the Architect Rick's godlike authority. He's not escaping one bad grandpa, he's filing for divorce from the entire Rick-written constitution of reality. And buckle up, because once you attack the authors, you're not just picking the most powerful Rick, you're asking who's powerful enough to live with no Ricks on top. Evil Morty's final move, when a Morty breaks Rick's monopoly. So what does Evil Morty actually do with that divorce paper from reality's Rick constitution? He cashes it. With interest. You watched it. He hijacks the Citadel like it's a student council meeting, rides President Morty's campaign straight into the server room of existence, and plugs himself into the central finite curve's control systems like he's updating his iOS. You know that golden wireframe donut thing on the screen? That's not just a cool screensaver. That's the multiversal firewall that says, only universes where Rick is the smartest guy get to exist in this neighborhood. And Evil Morty doesn't just peek at it, he literally punches a hole through it. Portal tunnel straight through the barrier, Ricks and Mortys getting liquefied in the breach like they're unpaid interns in a OSHA training video. It's a hell of a power move. Here's the legal twist nobody in universe is reading the fine print on. The curve is basically cosmic legislation. It's the illegal monopoly clause that guarantees every Rick inside it is top of the food chain by design. No smarter gods, no bigger sharks. Just Rick, forever. When Evil Morty shreds it, he's not just breaking a wall, he's repealing the law that says Rick is always the apex predator. Suddenly it's open season for universes where Ricks are outclassed, hunted, or completely irrelevant. Inside the curve, every Rick is technically born with plot armor. You don't have to be smart enough to beat God. God's not allowed in your zip code. Outside? Different game. Now your average Citadel Rick goes from guaranteed smartest being in reality to some guy with a portal gun in a multiverse that doesn't care. Retroactively, their power level drops. It's like finding out your 4.0 GPA came from a school where the only class was colouring. And here's where it gets spicy. Any Rick who saw this coming, helped it happen, or survives it with an actual plan, is operating on a different level. That's not just gadget brain. That's constitutional law of physics brain. Someone built the curve, someone maintained it, someone left enough cracks for a Morty to weaponize it. You really think the Ricks who engineered a multiversal filter didn't have contingency files labeled, "If Morty goes rogue"? If you ask me, the truly dangerous Ricks are the ones who are already gaming the system their own species wrote. So now that the curve is gone, who's actually on top? Is it the Rick who ruled when the rules were rigged, or the one who can stay terrifying when the cheat codes are off? Believe it or not, the most powerful Rick might be the one who's finally not special by default. And if the universe can spawn something smarter than Rick, what kind of monster is that Rick going to have to become to keep up? Meta power. Ricks who bend the story itself. So if the cheat codes are off, what happens when a Rick realizes he's in the game? Because some Ricks don't just beat the system, they look straight at the camera and go, "Yeah, I read the script." That's a different kind of monster. You see it all the time with C-137. He complains about bottle episodes, dunks on theme park rides like Story Train, and literally trashes continuity as canon bullshit. He tells Morty not to get attached because adventures always reset. That's not just sarcasm. That's a guy who kind of understands he's in a TV show. And if you know you're in a show, you can guess the beats. Fake out death here, emotional climax there, status quo restored by the end credits. That's a hell of a power if you ask me. Imagine two Ricks in a standoff. One is treating it like life or death. The other is quietly thinking, "They're not killing me mid-season, idiot." C-137 acts like that constantly. He rushes into suicidal plans, talks trash to godlike entities, and gambles Morty's life like it's Tuesday. Is that just nihilism, or a guy who's pretty sure the writers need him next week? Compare that to Rick Prime. Prime is colder, quieter, way less jokey. He doesn't wink at the audience, doesn't rant about narrative arcs, doesn't care about being in a Christmas episode. He feels grounded, like he lives in universe 24/7. That probably makes him scarier to meet in a dark alley, but it might also mean less narrative flexibility. C-137 bends with the plot. Prime tries to bend reality. Which wins in the long run? The Rick who understands he has plot armor, or the Rick who doesn't believe in anything except winning? And yeah, plot armor is absolutely a resource here. Some Ricks are built to die in one episode and never be mentioned again. You've got Doofus Rick, fascist Ricks, random background Ricks who get vaporized like it's legally required. Then you've got C-137, who survives Cronenberg Worlds, Galactic Prison, Evil Morty's Purge, and a breakup with Unity that should have emotionally killed him. If plot armor was an item in Rick's garage, C-137 has it equipped, upgraded, and probably duplicated. Believe it or not, that means meta power is almost like an extra life bar. A Rick who can sense, even subconsciously, this isn't how my story ends, is going to take risks other Ricks won't. He'll jump universes, blow up alliances, and taunt gods because the narrative keeps bending around him instead of breaking him. It's not legal, it's not fair, but it's real power. Is it stronger than structural control like the central finite curve? No. Evil Morty deleting the curve is still a higher tier flex. But meta-awareness does shove C-137 higher up the ranking than his raw tech or politics alone would justify. He's not the architect of the system, he's the guy who knows he's in a show about the system, and if you're trying to figure out which Rick comes out on top, you can't ignore the one who keeps surviving because the story literally needs him. The real question is, what happens if another Rick figures that out too, and decides he wants the main character spot for himself? So who's the apex Rick? Final ranking and justification. So if some other Rick wakes up and realizes he can hijack the main character spot, who actually wins that fight? Who's the apex predator in a multiverse that's already rigged for one guy? Buckle up, because we're finally going to rank these maniacs. Let's start at number 5, your high-tier local god Ricks. These are the miniverse guys, the dudes who look at a car battery and go, what if I enslaved a universe in there? On paper, that's god behavior. They create civilizations, define physics, and casually commit a crime against reality every few days before breakfast. But their power is super localized. Pull the plug on their box, smash the crystal, and suddenly your I am a benevolent god routine is just an old man yelling at atoms. Number 4, President and Political Ricks. Citadel, President Rick, Council Leaders, the bureaucratic overlords. They don't just own a portal gun, they own the rules about who's allowed to use one. They can order Ricks executed, rewritten, reassigned to daycare. It's like if the DMV could legally delete you. That's real control, but it's still inside the Rick system. They're managing the prison, not designing the walls. Number 3 is our guy, C-137 Rick. The one you follow, the one who keeps surviving, the one whose trauma dump is basically the show's spine. Why isn't he number 1? Because for all his unmatched improvisational genius, and I know I'm in a narrative swagger, he's mostly reacting to structures other Ricks built and crimes other Ricks committed. He breaks out of multiversal prisons, hijacks the Citadel, dodges the central finite curve like it's just traffic. But he didn't write that curve. He's the best player on the field, not the guy who drew the field. Number 2. Rick Prime. This is the Rick other Ricks literally built a Citadel to hide from. Believe it or not, you have to be a special kind of terrifying to scare infinite versions of yourself into inventing Rick witness protection. He operates outside their safety net, outside the curve, outside the Ricks are on top, and that's the law comfort blanket. He shapes the behavior of countless Ricks through pure fear. If you ask me, he's the purest, least domesticated form of Rick power we've actually seen walking around. But number 1, architect-level Ricks, the Curve authors, the ones who didn't just win the game, they wrote the rule that Ricks always win. That's a different order of control. You're not just holding the biggest gun, you're deciding which universes are legal to exist. That's like sentencing entire timelines to death, because they failed the Rick is smartest vibe check. We haven't met a named architect Rick, so the most powerful Rick might be a role, not a guy. But in terms of who actually shapes the multiverse, that role beats any ship, any council seat, and probably any revenge quest C-137 or Rick Prime can cook up. And I don't know, I'm kind of here for it. So where does that leave our Rick, stuck between a cosmic author and his own worst self? That's where things get really ugly for Morty. What happens to Ricks, after the curve, power in a fair universe? So where does that leave our Rick, stuck between a cosmic author and his own worst self? That's where things get really ugly for Morty, because evil Morty just kicked the training wheels off reality. When the central finite curve shatters, you lose the Rick participation trophy. You're not automatically the smartest man in the universe anymore. You're just some drunk with a portal gun in a neighborhood where the HOA is God, or worse, a guy who can turn off portal tech with a thought. Imagine a universe where your portal opens and nothing happens. No green swirl, no escape hatch, just you and the cosmic landlord you've been dodging rent from. Believe it or not, that's the upgrade evil Morty ordered. In a post-curve multiverse, some beings are going to outclass Rick so hard it's basically illegal. We're talking entities that can firewall entire timelines, quarantine Ricks like malware, or treat portal guns like fidget spinners. You know how Rick treats the Galactic Federation like a joke? Picture something treating Rick that way. He goes to crash a government, and they file him under pest control instead of existential threat. That's a hell of a downgrade. So who actually survives that ecosystem? C-137 is probably the cockroach of Ricks, and I mean that as a compliment. This is the guy who Cronenberged his Earth, buried his own body, and just kept going to school with Morty like it was a weird Monday. You throw him into a universe where he's prey, not predator, and he's going to treat it like a side quest. New gods, new rules. Cool, that's just more stuff to break. Rick Prime, on the other hand, feels built for this. The Citadel literally existed to hide from him. You don't scare Infinity Ricks by being mid. In a fair universe, where he's not guaranteed top IQ, Prime probably goes full apex serial killer, hunting down higher beings, reverse engineering their defenses, turning Rick-proof reality into a weekend project. If you ask me, he's the one who looks at a portal-dampening field and says, "Cute toy," then weaponizes it. But the Citadel pencil pusher Ricks, the ones whose whole power fantasy was bullying Mortys with HR paperwork and hiding behind council rules, they're done. Their crime wasn't just fascism, it was dependency. No curve, no council, no infinite army of variants to hide behind. Strip away the bureaucracy and they're just middle managers with lab coats. That's the real twist here. After the curve, power stops being about raw IQ and starts being about who can delete "I'm the smartest" from their personality without having a breakdown. Adaptability is the new portal gun. The Ricks who can reinvent themselves as survivors, cult leaders, sidekicks, or even emotionally available grandpas? They climb. The ones who cling to the brand of Rick Sanchez apex predator get eaten. Which is exactly Evil Morty's point. By blowing up the curve, he didn't just escape, he demoted the entire species. Every Rick now has to actually earn the ego they've been speedrunning on easy mode. No cosmic filter, no guaranteed curve stomp over your local god. Just to give you an idea of how brutal that is, imagine Rick having to do what Morty does every episode, walk into danger assuming he's outmatched. So when we ask who's the most powerful Rick, we're not talking about who has the biggest gun anymore. We're asking who survives a universe that doesn't care he's Rick. And the scary part? The answer today might not be the answer 10 seasons from now. The show can always introduce a universe where Ricks are livestock or collectibles, or an invasive species being exterminated. Buckle up, because if we ever see that kind of world on screen, the Rick sitting at the top of our tier list right now might end up as someone else's lab rat, and the real most powerful Rick might be a face we haven't even met yet. So, why do we even like this guy? Power, abuse, and cartoons. And that's kind of the punchline, right? We spend all this time ranking Ricks like Pokemon cards, but the show keeps whispering, hey, you know this guy's a walking red flag with a portal gun, right? Rick is basically a wish fulfillment fantasy duct taped to a horror movie. He's what you get if you took every intrusive thought you've ever had about quitting your job, dunking on your boss, and ignoring every law, and then gave it a genius brain, infinite gadgets, and zero empathy. Total freedom. No consequences. For him. For everyone else, that's where the body count, the war crimes, and the multiverse-wide trauma come in. Believe it or not, that mix is exactly why he's fun to watch. You get the thrill of what if I could do anything without the guilt of actually, doing anything illegal. And our little who's the most powerful Rick tier list is just the nerdy cousin of those crime escalation videos you binge at 2 a.m. You know the ones. We start with shoplifting, end at and now you're looking at 900 years for crimes against humanity. Rick does the same speed run. Petty cruelty to Morty, emotional abuse, some casual kidnapping, a sprinkle of genocide, and suddenly you're staring at a guy whose average Tuesday looks like a Hague highlight reel. Just to give you an idea of how messed up that is, imagine your worst boss. Now imagine every system around them is designed to protect them, reward them, and clone them. That's the Citadel. That's what happens when small abuses scale up and the universe basically says, yeah, this guy, let's put him in charge. And we still ask, who's the most powerful Rick? Like that's a prize. The irony is wild. The show is screaming that Rick's power makes him miserable. He's isolated, alcoholic, suicidal, incapable of real connection, and we're over here arguing if his portal gun beats Rick Prime's cosmic chess game. It's like watching someone win a hell of a cursed monkey's paw and going, nice, but what's the DPS? Ultimate power in this universe doesn't look like happiness. It looks like being the last guy at the party, surrounded by corpses and empty flasks. If Rick were real, we'd all be begging for some intergalactic legal system to step in and nerf him. Galactic Federation, Time Cops, Cosmic HR, I don't care. Somebody file a complaint. But because he's a cartoon, you and I get to sit back, watch him Cronenberg a planet and go, wow, that animation budget slapped. No paperwork, no therapy bills, just fireworks. I don't know, I'm kind of here for it. Anyway, if we can rank Ricks by raw power, we can definitely start ranking everybody else. Which Morty is most likely to overthrow his Rick? Which Jerry accidentally becomes a god? Which other cartoon character could survive 1 week in Rick's universe without getting turned into soup? Buckle up, because we're not done abusing fictional characters with fake metrics yet. Your turn. Pick the next multiversal menace. So now that we've emotionally waterboarded the entire multiverse, let's actually land this thing before a time cop writes us a ticket. What did we just do? We went from your bargain bin Citadel Rick, clocking in at generic smart alcoholic, up through political Ricks running space governments, past tech god Ricks building pocket universes, into C-137's trauma speedrun, through Rick Prime's murder tour, and finally to the creepy, almost off-screen architect Ricks, who literally shaped the central finite curve. That's the real escalation here. We didn't just ask, who's got the biggest portal gun? We followed the power ladder all the way up to, who wrote the rulebook that says Ricks get portal guns and everyone else gets screwed? Believe it or not, that's a hell of a different question. So if you ask me, the answer to who's the most powerful Rick is kind of a three-way monster. You've got the architect Ricks at the top, the ones who carved out a multiversal bubble where Rick is legally, cosmically required to be the smartest guy in the room. That's not just power, that's rigging reality. Then you've got Evil Morty's whole network, ripping through that filter and proving you can jailbreak the curve if you're petty and traumatized enough. And finally, Rick Prime, who basically looks at all those rules and goes cute and keeps winning anyway. So who actually gets your number one spot? Are you putting C-137 up there out of sheer protagonist bias because he's our Rick, even though half his feats are just plot armor and untreated depression? Or are you riding with Rick Prime because on-screen brutality feels more real to you than some faceless council of multiversal architects we only hear about in lore dumps? Who scares you more? The guy who kills your family, or the guy who edits the universe so that was always going to happen? And don't just yell at your screen, put it in the comments. Tell me which Rick you're sentencing to the cosmic top bunk and why. Is it curve writers, curve breakers, or curve ignoring psychos? While you're down there, pick our next victim. Do we go most dangerous Morty and figure out which anxious teen is statistically most likely to overthrow his Rick and commit war crimes? Do we rank scariest Jerry if he actually tried and see how illegal a motivated Jerry could get in, 3 days? Or do we cross universes and ask, which cartoon scientist could survive a day with Rick without being harvested for parts? I don't know. I'm kind of here for all of those. Anyway, before some Rick from another dimension rewrites your timeline so you never found this channel, and your recommended page is just boring cooking tutorials, do the illegal thing for the algorithm, like the video, subscribe, and ring that little notification bell. Buckle up, because if you stick around, we're definitely going to keep breaking the multiverse with fake math and bad morals.